So RMTV, here we are down at the European Commission, down at Smith Square, the old Tory Party headquarters building, famous for images of Margaret Thatcher celebrating her victories with Cecil Parkinson. I'm joined by Jeremy Corbyn, a member of the RMT group. Jeremy, good protest down here about the fourth rail package. What's it all about?
The European Union are trying to impose privatisation on every country, and they're under a lot of pressure from the big rail operators who stand to make a great deal of money out of privatisation. What we're saying here is rail is an essential public service. Rail must be publicly controlled, publicly owned and publicly run. That gives us safety, gives us good working conditions and gives us the chance of a planned transport system across Europe, not a free-for-all.
So basically the model in the UK of privatisation, the whole thing run for profit, forget about the staff, forget about the passengers, forget about safety, that's the European model that's now being rolled out across the continent.
When you introduced this point, you reminded us that Margaret Thatcher stood at that window and announced the brave new world of privatisation to get rid of what she called loss-making public enterprises. Well, British Rail managed to do an awful lot with very limited resources. Privatisation has meant fragmentation of our services, more public subsidy than ever, and worse conditions for passengers, much higher fares. And that is the model they're going to bring in all across Europe. What we want is a publicly controlled railway system that can give us all a good service.
So I'm probably the old Tory Party headquarters here. This is where it was all cooked up, all the privatisation stuff and all the rest of it. Bit of a sort of return home for us in a way, isn't it?
Well, it's moved on to their natural tenants really, because the European Parliament's in here now, who are responsible for privatising everything they can get their hands on. And we're campaigning against the fourth railway package today. But beyond the fourth railway package, to all transport modes, the European Union wants it to be in private hands. That means worse services for the travelling public, a tax on our members' pay conditions and pensions, and the fares going up for the travelling public as well. And what we want at the end of the day is that the railway should be returned back to public ownership, run as a social service, not for profit, and to give the people of this country a railway system and a transport system they deserve.
So what the EU are really saying is that all those railway systems in places like Spain and France, where a lot of money's been invested, are going to be ripped apart and turned into the British model.
Yes, well, they've used the taxpayers' money to invest, not the private people's money, and then now they've used the taxpayers' money, they want to hand it back to their friends, big business and cities that won't be interested at all in running the railway, about how much money they can extract out of the railway network. And the fact is, there was 1,200 amendments put up to the fourth railway package bill that's going through the rafts of the European Union. And quite clearly, we was the guinea pig in this country, breaking up the railway first of all into infrastructure and to the train operating companies. And now they want to roll that system out right across the length and breadth of Europe.
And we've seen this week that the publicly owned East Coast Main Lines put £1 billion into the treasury, no state subsidy, and yet the government are planning to re-privatise that as well.
Well, it just shows you the nonsense of it. Here you've got an industry that's been run for the public. People wouldn't even know whether it's private or public. But one thing's for sure, when the money at the end of the day is looked at the end of the year, they can either put the money back in to the railway network, or they can give it back to the state. One thing's for sure, if it's run purely by the private companies, they will keep the whole lot for themselves in the form of a dividend.
Well, we're joined by Stuart Howard now from the ETF. Stuart, nice to see you down here today. Lovely autumn morning down outside the old Tory headquarters here in Smith Square. Good turnout. What's the ETF's rationale on calling these demonstrations across Europe today?
Well, I think the important thing to remember is that this isn't just happening here in Smith Square in London. From Sofia in Bulgaria, Austria, Vienna, Germany, Spain, France, all around Europe, railway workers today are making a protest against the plans of the European Commission and European transport ministers to introduce another wave of liberalisation in rail services.
So we often hear that in other parts of Europe where there is a state-owned rail service that it's much better here in Britain. So what's the idea of actually turning the clock back and creating the same sort of chaos that we got in Britain in other parts of Europe where services seem to run pretty well? Well,
this is the thing. This is workers in Europe look at the nightmare in the UK. If you want to look at how to dismantle the rail services, look at the nightmare of contracting out of rail maintenance, track maintenance, and it's one of the most brutal, fragmented systems, most anti-human systems of labour that you could ever want to see. Of course, anybody with sanity in Europe is going to want to oppose that.
One final thing, Bob, great victory this week for the cleaners up on the Tyne and Wear Metro, 20% pay increase after a long hard fight.
Well, fantastic, because I mean these groups of people haven't got the ability to shut the railways down, and they've dug in on low pay, which means it's even harder for them to look after their families when they're taking action. But 20% over 4 years is no mean feat for any single person in industry together, and nothing but to take my hat off for the constant fighting and the determination to get success up there. This won't end low pay in Churchill's, but it'll make a big dent into it, and it just shows you what can be done if people at the end of the day have got the ability to stand firm and fight and get that determination to end low pay.
And it will take the same sort of fighting spirit to stop the continuing ripping up of the railways across the whole country. Really.
Yes, I mean it proves the point, doesn't it? I mean, the day if these low-paid people who can't stop the railway network and win successes like that, people that have got the ability to shut the railways down or shut other modes of transport down and put an economic effect on the employer should be able to do things a lot easier.
Cheers, Bob. Thanks for your time.